So it doesn't have to be like these big things where you have to put on the spandex and like go out and get super sweaty for 45 minutes, because all of the little things add up over the day.
I'm Casey Main, a jaded, hopelessly romantic, health-conscious party girl searching for meaning. And my mission is simple: to make life better, for myself and for you. I believe real change always comes from within, and the Better You podcast was born to discover hidden parts of ourselves and our stories. A safe place where we have real, honest conversations with people from all walks of life to help better understand ourselves so we can become better versions of ourselves. So come along on this journey of discovery with me so you can become a better you. Hello, and welcome back to another episode of the Better You podcast, where our focus is better understanding our relationship with ourselves. I am your host, Casey Main. Thank you so much for being here. There are tons of podcasts out there, and I just love the fact that you are choosing to listen to mine. It really means the world to me. I'm having a blast doing this. And I'm having so much fun that as we are in the midst of this coronavirus pandemic and we're all working from home and staying inside and quarantining and social distancing, I've moved to 2 episodes per week. So this episode is dropping on Tuesday, and there will be a whole new episode on Thursday. And I'm going to continue this 2-a-week pattern as long as this pandemic lasts. Hopefully it won't be a long time, or just as long as I can physically keep up with doing this. Luckily, I really love talking to people and interviewing people, and there's no shortage of amazing people to talk to. So I've been able to continuously book interviews, which will make it possible for me to churn them out twice a week. All right, so let's go ahead and read this week's 5-star review. It is from A. Ratajic, and it is titled Raw, Genuine, Honest, Refreshing Insight. I'm embarrassed for not having written a review earlier. I could have sworn I had, because I wait every single week for each new episode and have been doing so for many months. I love the way in which Casey interviews her guests and discusses topics about mind, body, and spirit. She is funny and real and not afraid to ask all the questions. She's extremely relatable, and her podcast has given me courage and motivation to look inside myself and question and define my thoughts and behavior, as well as wants and desires. Casey is an inspiration and breath of fresh air. I recommend her podcast to absolutely everyone. Ugh, that review just seriously warms my heart. Thank you so much. That is 100% why I'm doing this, to hopefully inspire and motivate you guys to go inward, question your thoughts and your beliefs, open your mind, and just ultimately end up better understanding yourself and how you interact with the people and the world around you. There is just so much power and so much peace in better understanding who we really are, which ties very much into this week's episode as we better try to understand our bodies and what our various aches and pains may be trying to tell us. But first, I want to tell you guys about my new product obsession. So today's episode, we're talking a lot about movement and stretching and exercise. And when you do those things, you can sometimes get a bit sweaty. Not to mention summer is coming, and if you live anywhere that gets as hot as it does here in Florida, then you're definitely sweating. So full disclosure, about a year or so ago, I stopped wearing deodorants. Yep. I know what you're thinking, like, ew, why? And the reason I did is because most of the mainstream deodorants contain toxic chemicals like parabens, which, as we learned in episode 36 with Dr. Liz, they're so bad for you. Like, they just totally disrupt your endocrine system. They also have aluminum in them, which studies have linked to various health problems, and just thousands of other harmful chemicals that go into making whatever the fragrance is. And I tried a couple natural deodorants, but just wasn't happy with them. They didn't work, or they kind of never dried. So it's like your pits always felt like they were sweaty even when they weren't. And so I just kind of gave up on it altogether. But recently I found one that I absolutely love. So the company is called Primally Pure, and they make a safe, effective, non-toxic deodorant that actually works. It doesn't contain any harmful chemicals, and it actually has ingredients that are good for your skin, like coconut oil, arrow powder, beeswax, and essential oils. And you can get a discount from being a listener of the podcast. So just use the code TheBetterYou at checkout and you'll get 10% off. Again, the company is Primally Pure, PRIMALLYPURE. And you can use the code TheBetterYou, all one word, at checkout for 10% off. Please just do yourself and your endocrine system a favor and throw out your toxic deodorant and try Primally Pure. I promise you will not regret it. I use the charcoal deodorant and I absolutely love it. All right, so let's get into this week's episode. Our guest today is Alexandra Ellis. She is the creator of AE Wellness, host of The Body Nerd Show, a motivational speaker, and a mobility coach who helps active people move smarter, maintain their bodies, and maximize strength with a customized wellness plan so they can enjoy life without pain. Her teaching and studies focus on injury prevention, rehabilitation, and wellness, and they're inspired by her studies at UC Davis, where she earned a BS in exercise biology. Her programs have helped people worldwide get stronger and out of pain so they can step into their greatest potential. And in this conversation, we talk about movement versus exercise and the role both play in our lives, the importance of incorporating a variety of movement into our days, how exactly sitting for long periods of time negatively affects our bodies, the one fundamental thing we all need to focus on but often gets forgotten, why it's important to develop more awareness of our bodies so we can become the expert and better understand what it's trying to tell us, the big three movements we should all focus on and why, what mobility is and why you should focus on that instead of strength or flexibility, and how to incorporate more variety of movement throughout your day. Heads up, there are several different YouTube videos that she mentions in the episode. Don't worry, I will link to all of those in the show notes. So get ready. This is a great conversation. I learned a lot. I've been trying to incorporate a lot of what she talks about into my daily life and just move more, move differently, and ultimately move better. So that's it. Let's go ahead and jump into this conversation with Alexandra. Let's start with your background and kind of what it is exactly that you do and like how you got into that.
Okay. So my first introduction to yoga, which is where I got really started, I was 15, I believe, eating pizza in my neighborhood. And a friend drove by. She had just bought a yoga studio and she needed some help with like the tech stuff. Like, do you want a job? And I'm like, oh yeah, of course. Like, come after school. This will be great. And so when I injured my back in college, I think it was like my junior year, which now sadly feels so far away.
Yeah.
When I injured my back and started doing physical therapy because I was having basically sciatica, which at any age sucks. But when you're 19 and you have back pain and you go to physical therapy and they give you these super, super gentle exercises that make you feel like you're 90 years old and it's never going to get any better. It was so frustrating. And I remember when I finally finished my physical therapy, I tried to fire the physical therapist too. And when I finally finished, she's like, okay, so now you need to work on core strength. And I was like, oh, okay. How? Like, how do I do that? And that's when I really turned to yoga and found the benefit of, a mindfulness practice of slowing down, of moving my body on a regular basis. And I was studying exercise biology. It's what my degree is in. And so textbook upon textbook of anatomy and physiology and biomechanics, but it never really clicked as far as like, I have the cheat sheet, right? I am the cheat sheet as far as how everything works together. And so when I started, really diving into yoga, and I did my teacher training right after I graduated, and my plan initially was to apply to physical therapy school. And I think the universe had other plans for that. Like weird stuff happened. Transcripts got lost in the mail. Things got delayed that shouldn't have been delayed. And I was working, it was like so bizarre. I had taken one class in high school at a community college and they were the ones that lost the transcript that like threw the whole thing off. So I was like, okay, I hear you, universe. We'll try something else. So I was working in a physical therapy clinic at the time as an aide and, teaching yoga and studying yoga. And in the physical therapy space, there's a lot of, workers' comp cases, especially where I was working. And people come and they're like, okay, fix me. And that's a very different mindset as to the types of clients I work with now, where they are willing to do the work and they want to know how it works so that they can fix themselves. And so through a series of injuries that I've experienced from that initial back pain, I mean, how many times have you sprained your ankle if like you've done anything in life, like as a kid, right? So every injury, I was like, that sucks. How do we help that never happen again? And so everything started to come together of, my anatomical background, biomechanics, yoga, movement, and figuring out how to get my body to a place where, now truly, like I'm stronger now at 32 than I ever was at 18. And it's not because I'm working out every single day, but because I'm moving my body every single day, which is different. And so now as a mobility coach, I train people how to move well, how to maintain their body, and how to maximize their strength so that they too can enjoy a life without pain. I think also people are so quick to just be like, well, now that I'm in my 30s or in my 40s or in my 50s or whatever it is, we just accept pain as the normal because we don't know that anything else is possible. And so I'm on a mission to try to show people like, yeah, you can feel good. And having pain doesn't have to be the default just because you work an office job or you're over the age of, 3.
You're right. We do tend to like normalize certain aches and pains, especially as we age, and just think that that's part of it. And so I want to get into all that. But first, like you mentioned, that you don't necessarily exercise every day, but like movement is super important, and you're like stronger now than you ever have been. And I don't know, something about that really hits home because I've worked mostly in office jobs. Well, yeah, I guess like my entire career, but I've always been an exercise person. I prioritize that. And it's usually kind of a more intense type exercise. So I was into distance running for a bit, and then I worked out with the trainer, and then now I'm kind of more into the HIIT, like F45 stuff. Yeah. And so, it's like, sweat your ass off exercise. But now, like the rest of the day, for the most part, like I'm sitting in front of a computer and writing or recording or editing a podcast or, whatever it may be. And so I just think that's such a misconception that we have. And I know I have, that in order to be strong, you have to do the intense exercise and like the heavy lifting and stuff. So talk a little bit about just like the difference between movement and exercise and like the role each of them play.
Yeah. Well, and also if we don't exercise, like 8 times a day or 8 times a week, if you can't do that, so many times people are like, well, I guess I just shouldn't even try. We're so like all or nothing on, all kinds of ways. And I do like HIIT training. I love that. There's this class at the gym that I go to every week, and it's 45 minutes and circuits and this and that. Exercise in itself is a stress to your body, whether it's distance running or weightlifting or whatever. And so if you don't give your body enough time to actively and fully recover in between bouts, it's sort of like you just keep debiting from an account, but you're not putting enough into it. And movement can be as simple as walking. I live in an apartment here in LA. I have a dog. We walk like 4 or 5 times a day because that's the only option, and I think people tend to like diminish how effective walking is, but it's really good for you, and it's simple, it's cheap, it doesn't require any equipment. Running isn't the only thing. Like I have started to pick up running more now and I enjoy it, but walking is just as good. It's not like the only thing. And so movement in itself, beyond just your exercise, because like to your point as well, you do your hard workout and then you're sitting for the rest of the day. Most people sit on average 14 hours a day when you think of like sitting at the kitchen table or sitting in your car in your commute or sitting at your desk too. And in some of the research I've looked at as far as like sedentary lifestyle and its effect on the body, just increasing, for some reason in the research, they were using like TV time as their measurement. So if there was an increase in TV time by 2 hours, which is not that much when you think of like any Netflix binge, like 2 hours can go by super fast. But even for people who exercised, the negative effects weren't offset by the exercise if you also were sedentary. It's like the exercise doesn't give you a hall pass to then be able to sit all day or to sit every night in front of the TV. But movement, right? It can be walking. It can be sitting on the floor, right? Because movement is like anything that puts your body into different positions that might not be happening in your day otherwise. So if you think of the shape of a chair, right? It's the exact same like biomechanical positioning, right? Of your hips being bent at like 90 degrees and your knees being bent at 90 degrees. And, your back is probably a little bit slouched because of gravity. So sitting, whether again at the kitchen table, on the toilet, in your car, on the couch, it's all the same thing. So we just end up doing a lot of the same stuff all day, every day. And so sitting on the floor, it could be, I have a pull-up bar hanging in my house so that every time I walk underneath it, I just like reach up and touch it because that gets my shoulders in another position. So it doesn't have to be like these big things where you have to put on the spandex and like go out and get super sweaty for 45 minutes because all of the little things add up over the day, so that counts as well.
That's so interesting. And it, as much as I don't want to hear it, I hear it that like the exercise doesn't give you a hall pass, but like we got my dad a Fitbit for Christmas because since he's retired, he spends a lot of time sitting in his chair and watching TV. And I mean, to his credit, he works out with a trainer, I think 3 days a week. He golfs 2 days a week, but then it's like his mindset is similar to what mine has been, is similar to, I think, a lot of people like, oh, okay, I got my exercise in, so I'm good.
Right.
And so we got him this Fitbit to alert him like, hey, you've been sitting for a long time. And then I had dinner with him a couple weeks ago and we were talking about it because I recently got a Garmin and I've been trying to be better about steps that I get in during the day and stuff and not just sit here for long periods of time. And he's like, oh yeah, I turned that alert off. I'm like, why did you do that? And he's like, well, I don't want it beeping at me. I'm like, Dad, the whole reason we got that, like, is so you don't sit for long periods of time. And he's like, I know that when I'm sitting for a long period of time. He's like, what good is like getting up and walking to the back of the condo going to do for me? And I didn't have like an answer. Like I didn't have an explanation to him. What is it about sitting for a long period of time that like, what is that doing to our body? I understand kind of the restricted movement in terms of now we're either standing or just in this one kind of all these right angles of our joints, but like what are some of the negative impacts of like that just lack of movement for extended periods of time?
Also, as far as trackers go, I turned that off too because it was really obnoxious. And so then, I check my steps. So I try to get 10,000 steps every day, which is also a completely arbitrary number, but I'm like, this is my goal. Let me just try to hit it. And so I'll drag my husband on like a 45-minute walk after dinner. Because I'm like, I haven't gotten all my steps yet. He's like, but I'm tired. So like,
yeah, for competitive people or like specific goals, like it helps me to be like, oh man, like if it beeps at me to move and I opt not to, I feel lazy. So I'm like, all right, I can do this. So it helps me.
I still get my steps, but yeah, no. Trackers technology is helpful, but it can also be, like I got 6,000 steps yesterday because it's raining and then I felt bad about it, which is stupid. So that's a whole nother conversation itself.
Right. Yeah. Our mindset about it. Exactly.
Yeah. But as far as like movement in your body was designed to move all the way down to a cellular level. So even the way cells communicate one another relies on movement, how fluid flows through your body, specifically the fluid that's like not blood and not in your cells, but like extracellular, which is called lymph, that relies on movement to move through your body. And so people who don't have a lot of movement have issues with swelling in certain places.
So is that why like there's kind of like the those things that like, you put your feet on and it vibrates, or even just like the dry brushes, all that stuff that's supposedly good for like your lymphatic system is because it's kind of moving your cells around?
Yeah, well, it helps to, increase blood flow and help to move the lymph around, because the lymph, it relies on your muscles and movement. And so if your muscles aren't contracting and kind of like squishing it back up to where your lymph nodes are, like in the groin and in the stomach, and they're also like in and around your face and stuff. If the muscles aren't doing the job, it just kind of like sits there. And the lymph is also like the garbage truck. I mean, that's not a great descriptor of it, but it's gathering up cellular waste, byproducts of, what's going on in your body. So if it's just like sitting there and it's not getting filtered in the way that it should, that can create inflammation. That can create, even like personally, I'm experiencing right now and I don't know what's happening, but breakouts, right? Like hormonal breakouts. And it's all, my lymph system is like all super angry right now. Just like stress, probably because of my tracker, because I'm too worried about not getting to that. But like, so moving lymph through your body, and also just when you sit, all of your processes, like, metabolism and even, blood flow, everything just slows down. And so over a long period of time, that can affect the efficiency of things as well. Even type 2 diabetes, affecting like blood sugar, like when you sit for long periods of time, like your body just becomes less effective at being more human. This whole new bit of like sitting all day and working every day. And even I will say too, standing all day, ask any nurse who works any shift, like standing all day isn't the fix either. It's moving in a variety of ways, changing position, and like breaking up your day so you're not stuck doing the same thing for hours and hours on end.
Okay. If you think about it, like it does make sense. So it's almost like when we're idle, whether that be idle sitting or idle standing, we're not moving around, then several different parts of our body like that have jobs to do, they kind of just sit down too. And they're like, all right, we're just going to kind of relax as well.
We're just going to chill here. Well, and like the way the fluid, like I said, but blood flow up to your brain, just metabolism, like all of those things just slow down. And then also, like, if you're not moving, you don't want to move because it costs a lot of energy and you're tired. But the thing that anybody who has gone from, sitting a lot to just starting to exercise, like once you get over that initial hump, you have more energy because you're moving, because your body is able to just like process through all of the things. You sleep better because you're moving. And it doesn't, like we've said, like it doesn't have to be this high intensity exercise, like walking around, even if it's just your apartment, starting there, just like walking around your tiny apartment can also help with these same benefits.
Okay, that makes sense. All right, let's talk about pain a little bit, because I think that kind of like we talked about earlier, we have little aches and pains and we just kind of discount them as no big deal. And so you're saying like no pain needs to be normal pain. So talk a little bit about kind of some of the common, like everyday aches and pains that we experience probably from all of this like lack of movement. Like what are some of the most common ones?
Yeah, for sure. Let's talk about it as far as like your car, right? When that check engine light goes on in your car, do you ignore it for another 10,000 miles, right? Typically, sometimes I know, I'm like, my oil change needs to happen too. But, we tend to take better care of our cars than we do ourselves, right? You change your tires at regular intervals, you get oil changes, you listen to that check engine light for the most part. But in our body, stuff crops up and we're just like, oh, maybe it'll go away, right? Maybe I'll just like pop an Advil and then it'll be fine tomorrow. And sometimes that does work for, a while, but then we run into, oh, well, now I need a knee replacement because my knees have been hurting for 15 years and I never did anything about it. And so there's so much you can do of when, like those little check engine lights go on in your body. And that to me is really what pain is. It's just a little signal of like, hey, something's going on here. Typically it comes down to how you're moving and really like the mechanics of it, which also rolls back into posture, which is the most unsexy, boring thing ever. But if you think of your body and how it feels and how it really functions as a reflection of the sum total of all of the things that it does, right? And if you are typically sitting in a chair most of the day, well, then it's no wonder that your lower back hurts, or that your hip flexors are tight, or that your neck is super, super tired, because we sit and we set ourselves up into a position where the muscles like literally don't have the leverage to hold you upright. So like just for the head, for example, your head with your brain and all the stuff inside of it typically weighs about like 10 to 12 pounds. And then your neck is super teeny tiny, right? The actual bones of your neck are like very small when you think of like how big your lower back vertebra are. And so for every inch that your head comes forward over your shoulders, like when you're driving or when you're staring at your phone in your lap, or even when you're like looking at your computer screen, that 10-pound head gains an extra 10 pounds of effort, right? Because of that leverage of gravity of all of those things. So all of a sudden the 10-pound head is like a 40-pound head, and the muscles that were supposed to be supporting it are now not in a mechanically efficient position to actually be able to generate any leverage. And so your body just gets like super, super, super tight to try to like hold stuff down. And then something else crops up. You're like, God, my neck, it hurts so much. I don't know why. And I keep stretching it, but that's not helping. And so for all of these things, yes, move a little bit more. It can be as simple as walking, but also start to pay attention to your posture. Try to get your head on top of your shoulders, stand with your feet pointing mostly forward-ish when you're standing, and try to get your shoulders and ribs to be right over your hips, because that puts your core in a better position to support you, to then stabilize your lower back. It gives your neck and upper back an easier opportunity to support and stabilize your big old head, And so just like setting yourself up in better positions can take a lot of the stress and strain off your body, which will then also help to alleviate some of those common aches and pains of like neck and shoulders and lower back.
Yeah, I listened to your podcast episode about posture. It might have been this morning. And then I was like, it was so fascinating because I think, and you talked about this a little bit, we tend to think good posture, like puff out our chest, but that's not it. It's almost more about like bringing things backward, not puffing them out, like bringing your head back over your shoulders and like your shoulders back over your hips and kind of trying to create that straight line. And it felt super awkward to try and do that. And I was like, I didn't think I had bad posture, but I'm sure years and years and years sitting at a desk and then, more recently just hunching over looking at phones and stuff, like I'm sure all of our posture is pretty horrible.
It's atrocious. But here's the thing too about posture. You never reach a point where you're like, I'm perfect now. Never ever do I slouch. Like even as I'm talking to you, I'm leaning into the mic and all of that. And so really it's not about perfection and being perfect all of the time, but building up the awareness of where you are positioned in space at any given time. And exactly like you're saying about, oh gosh, it feels so weird. Your brain maps your position that you're in most often. And so when we start to adjust posture, it feels really, really, really weird because it's unfamiliar. But after, enough times and like, it's just like learning any new skill and you practice it again and again and again. And then your brain will start to map and relearn this new position as the normal. And the awareness, it's like balance too, like you never reach a point where you're like, here I am perfectly balanced. It's a living, breathing, dynamic thing and it's changing too. And so my whole thing is like, there's no one exercise to fix them all and you're not going to have it perfectly figured out. But if you can be more educated about your body and have more awareness of what's going on, not only are you able to like hear all of the little whispers of what's happening in your body, but you're also not afraid of things that come up, because I think with pain, something hurts and you're like, you go to WebMD and then you have cancer, like that's the only option. And so when we don't understand what's happening in our body, it can feel like this really scary and unfamiliar thing. And again, it's like, just like with your car, you're like, oh, well, probably I need the oil change. But if it's something bigger and you don't know what's happening, it does feel unfamiliar and scary. And the best way to learn about your body is just spend more time paying attention to moving, to stretching, to doing self-care that gets you in your body, whether it be body work or whatever. And then you're the expert on you. You don't have to rely on somebody else to tell you what's going on.
Yeah, I hear that and I love that. But I'll say it can get kind of frustrating and overwhelming because all right, so our body is a whole system that all works together. So, let's say it starts with sitting too much and developing bad posture. And so then that's like a domino effect of, I'm sure certain muscles are then going to overcompensate for the ones that are having a hard time or whatever it may be. So then we're kind of out of balance, whatever. Then let's say you do some exercise, which in theory is a good thing, but now you're maybe lifting heavy things or doing this stressful thing with your body that is out of balance, which is then going to make it worse. So when you start to feel aches and pains, it's kind of like, I don't even know where to begin. Like I can recognize, okay, I know it's probably not what I think it is. Like it's something else. So I had some lower back pain a while ago and I'm like, it's probably not my back. Like chances are it's my hips. And so I was better about like stretching out my hips and pigeon pose and all that. And ultimately that helped alleviate my back. But like, how do we, because I hear you on like pay attention and awareness, but when there is a pain, and there's almost like endless options of like what could be causing it.
Yeah.
It is, other than posture, are there certain places that are a good bet to start?
Yeah, absolutely. So I call these 3 exercises the big 3, and they're not so much as exercises as they're just movements, and you can use them sort of as assessments. So the first one is the squat. So the question is like, can you squat well without pain and be able to stabilize your spine while you do it? And if that answer is no, then start with what hurts when you do that, right? Is it your ankles that are super stiff so you can't get into squat? Cool, start there. Do you find that your back arches when you're in a squat? All right, great. Let's work on core strength and core control. So the squat is one of them. The other,
go real
ahead.
Quick though, when you say squat, so is it like a squat like you would do at the gym where you're kind of going down to where your thighs are like parallel with the ground, or is it a squat like babies do when they squat down and their butts practically like down to the ground?
Right. Great question. Ideally, right, squatting is a completely natural, normal human movement. There are people in other cultures and countries who still squat even when they're like 95 because they've done it their whole lives. And so part of why, like we can't squat as well here in the US is because we just don't do it. So I think being able to do both is important. Having the flexibility to be able to go into a deep squat where you can like hang out and send a text message, which is a great place because you can rest your elbows on your knees. It's very handy. But then also to have the muscular control to be able to do, maybe thighs parallel, maybe a little bit lower, but probably don't need to, and back up with control. So they're different,
Yeah. All right. So I'm going to use myself as an example. All right. So I cannot do the like toddler squat. Like, I mean, I can, but my heels will come off the ground. So what's probably tight within me? Is that a hips thing? Is it a like back of my calves?
I mean, it could probably be all of the above. So also typically what I see with squats, and I'll give you the link. I have a YouTube video on how to squat in a way that really uses your hips and your hamstrings rather than your knees. So I'll share that video with you.
Yeah, perfect. I'll put it in the show notes.
Yeah, because people don't squat in a way that uses like the most mechanically efficient process, right? So the knees are coming over the toes and the back is arched and all of that. So oftentimes just cleaning up your squat like position or your squat form, so to speak, will help. And then also give you a better idea of like, oh, I'm really restricted or tight here. But if your heels are coming up off the ground, then it's probably foot, ankle, calf that's really tight. But then the next question above that is like, okay, but why? Like, why are they tight? So then we could say, okay, well, like what type of footwear are you wearing? You said you're a distance runner, right?
Oh, I used to be. I used to run half marathons, and then I did a full marathon in 2017, and then I haven't really run since because
Okay, well, fair
that was
enough.
so horrible.
Well, we'll just say you used to run. But, feet and ankles, again, can be like tight from the type of footwear we use, the type of surfaces we're walking on. So everything is paved, and if you're, when you walk on sand, how exhausted your feet and ankles get. Mm-hmm. Right? Because they have to actually work. So that's a great rehab for your feet and ankles to like get them stronger. And what will happen is as your feet and ankles and get stronger, your calves will become more flexible. And maybe that is the key to unlock the squat for you. But also if you've been saying, oh, I had some lower back hip stuff, it's probably coming from there too. So if you're all like, holding on to the edges, like, oh my gosh, there's so much to focus on. Let's start here. So how I work with my clients is I tell them to pick 5 body areas to focus on. So like for you, for example, definitely we would do like feet and ankles, probably hips, maybe lower back only because you said something was going on, and then like neck and upper back. And that usually covers like most people, right? That's like, unless, you have something specific going on in your knees or, something like that. So then on maybe daily basis, but sometimes that's too much. So let's say 3 times a week, you pick one body area and then you spend like 15 minutes doing some mobility work. Maybe it's stretching. Maybe it's doing, a specific exercise that targets a muscle. Maybe it's just working on balancing. Maybe your exercise is like walking on sand. Like all of these things could count. And so the next day or the next time you do a different body area. And then the next time a different body area. So by the end of 2 weeks, if you're doing like 3 times a week, you've covered your whole body, and then you just keep cycling through that. And that kind of like having that consistency and like focusing on one body area at a time can help it to be less overwhelming, but will also help you find all new things. So maybe you're doing something on your calf and you're like, oh, weird, but like now my hip feels super tight. So then that's where you go. And so it's not so much a game of whack-a-mole as it is just like, oh, I didn't know that was that way until I kind of went and investigated,
Yeah.
So that can help to like make it a little bit more tenable. But I also add, so we started with the squat, and I'll send you a video for this exercise too. The hip hinge, which if you've been in the gym, it's like a deadlift, a good morning where you just bend over from your hips and not your lower back. Because most people, even the pictures that say, here's how to properly lift, the illustration, their back is like all curved and messed up. And so learning how to hip hinge, even when you're like bending over at the sink to like spit out your toothpaste, that challenges and uses your hips and hamstrings as they were designed. It helps you to use your core to better stabilize your spine. And it takes a ton of the pressure off of your lower back because you're not constantly bending from your lower back, which wasn't designed to move in that way. So I'd say,
okay, so when you say the hip hinge, you're saying that we bend forward while keeping our back like flat and straight. So we're really bending at the hips and not curving the back. Okay.
Yeah. So learning how to hip hinge, because that becomes a foundation. Remember I said like how you move throughout your day is more important. So how do you pick up your laundry basket? If you're bending over and your back is bent, one time that might be fine, but 100,000 repetitions later over a lifetime, like that might be literally the straw that breaks the camel's back, right? And so it wasn't the laundry basket's fault. It was so many different repetitions of bending from the lower back that created the issue. And so easy fix is learn how to bend from your hips so that you don't put that strain on your body in places that weren't designed for it. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And so then like intentionally do that throughout your day. So I'm thinking like at night, I lean over the sink to wash my face. I'm not hip hinging, and I can do it. Like if I'm at the gym and we're doing the, good mornings or whatever, I know how to do it, but I don't think about doing it every single time I bend over.
And that's the thing, like good posture and positioning, like I was this way too. Like I was so good at it when I was in the gym, but the rest of the time I'm just like flopping around all over the place. And just like with your posture and your positioning, it's like how you move throughout the day is more important than that like 1 hour of exercise or 2 hour of exercise.
Right. Because it's more of the consistency and the repetition, which is what's what your brain, like you were saying, is going to map.
Yeah, because when injuries happen, like for sure they happen in the gym, but like when I injured my back, it was because I was like sloppily pushing something over while bending and twisting. And so the more often you practice moving well and, doing things like the squat and the hip hinge and practicing posture, that becomes your set point. That becomes a new normal. So whether you are tired or you're rushing or you're not paying attention, like that's your body's normal. And so your risk of injury is lower because your body already knows how to move well.
Gotcha. Okay. All right. So the squat, the hip hinge, what's the third one?
The third one is overhead reach, which is just reaching your arms overhead without letting your rib cage pop forward. So usually people's shoulders are super tight because, again, technology. And so this movement and getting better at the movement not only helps to improve shoulder range of motion, but also looking at core control. Right? Do my ab muscles all the way around and really all of the core musculature, can they stabilize my spine, my ribs, my lower back so I can reach my arms overhead without my spine going along for the ride?
I'm like putting my arms up in the air now because I know my shoulders are tight too. I think I'm like a little bit of a mess. I don't have a lot of pain, but I also recognize I think I'm a little bit of a mess.
Honestly, if you're a human in the modern world, like there are definitely places to improve range of motion, which will just help you feel so much better.
Okay. All right. So when you talk about mobility exercises, because this is something I hear about and there's, classes and whatever. So is that essentially working all the different little stabilizer muscles, like the little muscles that are the supporting cast of our major muscles?
Well, mobility, as I understand it, and I'm sure you could ask, 10 different people, get 10 different answers. But if you think of stretching as just flexibility, and strength as just like, brute strength, mobility is kind of like the marriage of the two. So it's really your ability to move your body and move your joints through full range of motion with control. So not like a passive stretch where you just kind of flop into it, but, can you actually, control how your leg moves and still maintain core stability and all of those things. So mobility exercises, I always struggle with like how to describe what it is that I actually do that makes sense to people. Cause I'm like, I'll just move my body. But like, what does that mean? To me, it's, doing exercises to moving your body while paying attention to, posture and positioning, and exploring end ranges of motion versus just stretching a ton. Because when I finished my yoga teacher training, it's a 200-hour training program. You're spending 8 hours a day all weekend, and then you go to yoga class during the week. Like I was super flexible, but I still had like aches in my lower back and my neck really hurt. And I remember one time taking a yoga class and like my whole back seized up and I just had to lay in bed for like the whole night, which was so weird and felt awful. And so super flexible isn't the answer. And then being super rigid, like, Arnold Schwarzenegger bodybuilder also isn't the answer. And so to me, mobility is like the middle where you're strong enough to control and stabilize your body to lift what you need to lift and move about your day without worrying about your body. And then you also have the flexibility to, do what needs to be done. Does everybody need to touch their toes? Maybe not. But if you stop at your knees, it might be worth exploring how to improve hamstring and hip range of motion.
I love that because it's like finding a balance point, which is kind of what we're trying to do in like every freaking aspect of life, like the balance between strength and flexibility, and then like putting our bodies back in balance so that we're moving as we are designed to move.
And I will say too, like, especially as women, there's this big fear of getting stronger and then like bulking up, which is just like such nonsense. If you are not training like a bodybuilder and you're not training like Arnold, like your body won't look that way. We don't even have the hormones to look that way. Like it's not going to happen. And I'm already like hyper flexible as it is. And when I started really lifting weights and focusing on strength training in that way, the flexibility I lost was like so small, but what I gained in stability and also like, it is so empowering to be able to go to Costco and load everything out of your car into your car yourself. and I'm small, I'm 5'1". And just like, the sense of that, especially as a woman, to be like, I can do this. Now, I don't always choose to. Like, my husband's always like, well, you could carry this. I'm like, I know, but so can you. But it makes you feel like such a badass and so confident. And so I just really want to encourage everyone, like, don't be afraid of strength training. You're not going to look like Arnold. It'll be okay.
Yeah, I had those fears years ago, I think, when I first started working out with a personal trainer. And then, I was convinced over the years, like, it's not going to happen. I mean, if you wanted to bulk up like some of the more bulkier, fitness people, like, that takes a very concerted effort of a training program, a diet, probably, supplemental nutrition like that.
Yeah.
You have to be really actively trying to do that. But I do believe, like, some women have a natural more muscular tone than others. Like, I'm a more muscular female than some. And so even then I'm thinking, oh no, I'm going to bulk up. But I've just learned over the years, like, that's not going to happen.
No. Well, and also, again, Costco, or, if you have a cat and you buy cat litter, like, that thing of cat litter has got to be easily 10, maybe even 15 pounds. It's so super heavy. So you are already picking up things that have weight to them in your day-to-day life anyways. Wouldn't you rather learn how to do it in good positions, and then practice that so that becomes the default? And really, like, that's what every workout I do is like, how can I learn how to move throughout my environment better so I don't have to think about it as much?
Right. So what are some either movements or stretches that are kind of across the board good for everybody to do, either on a daily basis or every other day, like just kind of consistent movements or stretches?
Well, one thing, I'm going to send you the video for this too, because this will be good for you and really for everybody. It's something I call the 5-way shoulder warm up. And you can do this with a rolled up towel. You can do this with a foam roller. I like to do it with a small inflatable ball, sort of like a playground ball. And when you put that underneath your upper back and have some support underneath your head, but it's the opposite of our computer position that we're in all day. So it helps to give you a little bit of that spinal extension right through your rib cage spine, which feels amazing because most of us are stiff through there because we just don't move that way. And it also helps to stretch across the front of your shoulders and into your chest and your pecs. And then once you're there, you can do 5 different shoulder and arm position, movement things to get some dynamic stretching. But I probably do that. I mean, definitely every time I go to the gym, probably like 4 or 5 times a week, because it feels so super good. So I think I tell my clients too, I'm like, everybody should be doing this one. And then another great exercise, honestly, like, is just sitting on the floor, which is a great stretch. And then it's also strengthening because when you have to get back up off the floor, right, you have to use your hips and legs and sometimes your arms and ways that they might not be used to otherwise. So one thing you can do while sitting on the floor is just play with, like, how many different positions can you put your legs in, right? Can you sit cross-legged? Can you sit with one shin stacked on top of the other, like fire logs, both sides? Can you sit with the legs off to one side or bent off to the other side, one leg out? Just play with all of these different positions and you're going to find where you have restrictions, where you're tight. And it's just the opposite of sitting in a chair. So I would say, like, those 2 are probably the best places to start.
Okay. All right. I love those.
It's easy, right? It doesn't have to be complicated. And I think that's what we sort of feel like, oh, but there's no manual for the human body. When really, if you just like dip a toe in and you just get started, you'll gain your confidence. You'll learn to trust your body more. You'll learn to trust yourself more. And, like, you already know what to do intuitively. It's just get started.
Right. And I think can be the off-putting part of it, I guess, is that we want, because this is just the world we live in, we want a simple, easy answer. Like, here, just do this. Almost like you said, your clients in physical therapy, fix me. Like, what do I need to do to be fixed? And it's not one answer. It's getting in touch with your body, listening to that, knowing your own body, and then kind of feeling that out. And that's going to change because, like you said, it might be a pain in one thing and you work on that, and then now the pain moves. And so it's not one easy answer from now until the end of time. Like, it's not like one routine you can do, which I feel like our brains don't like that because our brains prefer routine and pattern versus like all of this fluidity.
Yeah. Well, and one thing I do for my clients, like we create a customized wellness plan for them that they work on for like 90 days at a time. And I encourage them, like, stick with these same things for a couple of weeks so that you can really get into them before you switch. Like, it doesn't have to be something different all the time. This concept of like muscle confusion, I feel like is baked into people's minds. Like, well, if it's not different, it's not working, which isn't necessarily true. Like, your muscles are just doing what your brain says to them. And getting stronger is actually your brain getting more efficient and coordinated at that move, right? It's more coordinated and actually like firing the nerves to engage the muscles. And so practicing the same thing consistently isn't necessarily a bad thing,
Yeah. Okay. I love that. Thank you so much. This is very helpful. And so I will link to all of the videos that you mentioned. I'll link to those in the show notes if you send those to me. Anything else we need to know about movement before I let you go?
One thing actually I just thought of too, and another reason why you should start moving and just start paying attention to your body is it puts you into a better position when you do inevitably end up at a physical therapist, at a chiropractor, at a doctor or whatever. Because now the person in power isn't just the doctor, right? You're able to actually have a conversation with them about what's going on, what you've tried, what's working, what's not working. Similar to like what I said about physical therapy, as opposed to just like waltzing in and being like, hey, fix me. So learning and becoming your own expert actually helps all of your healthcare providers do their job even better. So if that's not reason enough, like, come on, just move your body.
Yeah, no, I love that answer because that is such a good point and this is nothing against the healthcare system or any healthcare practitioners. I worked in the healthcare system for a long time, but it's become a specialized field. So people specialize in a certain aspect of healthcare, which is great because they're super experts on what they know. So when you go to a certain type of doctor, like their recommendation is going to be the answer that they know, but that doesn't mean it's the only option. Like if you go to an orthopedic surgeon, chances are their recommendation at some point is going to be surgery.
Yeah.
And not to say that it's ill-intentioned, but like that's what they know. So the more you kind of know about your body, you can kind of become your own advocate and understand that, it's a system that's working together and it's more complicated and there isn't necessarily one easy fix. So if somebody's offering you an easy fix, you at least kind of have the awareness to question that and get second opinions.
Yeah, there's no quick fix. It's a bummer because it's a lot of work, but it's just, sorry, it's how it works.
Yeah. Okay, great. So tell everybody where they can find you, your website, socials, all that kind of stuff.
Yes. Well, I would say I live at aewellness.com. But yeah, that's where my whole business, life, everything revolves around aewellness.com. You can find information about my podcast, The Body Nerd Show there. And also I spend a lot of my time on social, on Instagram. I'm at Hala for Mala. And then over on Facebook too, but it feels less fun, but I am there, so you can come hang out as well. Thank you so much too for having me. This has been a really fun conversation. I actually had fun because I'm a huge nerd, doing some of the research before about, movement and sedentary lifestyle and all that. So thanks for the opportunity.
I love it. Thank you so much for coming on. I really do appreciate it.
Yeah, my pleasure.
All right, that'll do it for today. Thank you very much for listening. If you are not already, please follow the podcast on Instagram or Facebook. We are at The Better You Podcast. You can reach me if you've got feedback on the episode or topics you would really like me to cover or guest suggestions, anything. You can reach me at thebetteryouPodcast@gmail.com. Please, please, please leave a review. It helps so much in the podcasting world. And yeah, I believe that is it for today, and I will see you all on Thursday.